Welcome to the Zachrilege cast. Nick Fish, a president who can find Phoenix with a map. How's it going?
It's really good, Zach. How are you doing tonight?
Doing great. So we have someone who's from Michigan, and just coincidentally, I happen to have Michigan beers in my house. So I have a Cabin Fever from New Holland, and then the official show beer, Dragon's Milk, also from New Holland and Michigan. So there you go.
Solid choices all around.
Solid choices. And I don't know what it is about Michigan, but they know how to do it.
A lot of really good microbrews and craft stuff coming out of Michigan. It's one of the things that I definitely miss about living there is the that type of beer culture and all the really great local craft brews. Not a huge thing here in Jersey, weirdly.
I feel like everybody I talk to around the country, like they usually have stuff, but I'm sure there are pockets where it's not as prevalent as in others. But you have moved from Michigan to, we'll go Jersey, wherever secret place Eli Bosnick lives, somewhere around there in New Jersey.
Something like that, yeah. Well, my history of moving around kind of took me all across the country. Born and raised in Michigan, but after in the 2008, I worked on the 2008 presidential election. Started in Michigan and originally was going to work the election in Michigan, but they did the math and said, well, we don't really think Michigan is going to be that competitive, actually. So we'd like you to go to North Carolina. So I actually was in Raleigh, North Carolina for the last 3 months of the presidential election. And then I went up to Boston and was there for about a year and a half. And I went from there to Austin, Texas, did a little bit of time in Denver, Colorado, and then up to Washington, D.C., and I was there for about a year and a half, and then finally up here to New Jersey, and that was 2012. So I was in something like 6 or 7 places for varying amounts of time from 2008 until 2012 when I finally ended up here in New Jersey. And I've been here since. I've been with American Atheists for 8 years now, and that was what brought me up here from D.C. after working with the Secular Coalition for America. So a lot of travel in the initial part of my career, but I've mostly stayed put since moving into New Jersey.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering, so that is the activist lifestyle like being in the military in a way? You just have to kind of move around to find positions?
Yeah, I worked for the same company actually for a lot of those moves. So it wasn't so much I had to do the campaign lifestyle. Like there are people who work on campaigns that you have to move from one place to the next and then the next and then the next, and you never quite know where you're going to end up. I know some people that go back and forth from, whatever state they primarily work in, and then they'll go to either New Jersey or Virginia to work the off-year elections, because we have our state and local races for state legislature and governor are on the odd years, so they're not at the same timeline as the federal races. And so lots of people will do that. They'll work wherever they work most of the time and then go to Virginia and work the other year and then go back to where they work and just do a cycle like that if they're working local races. I was pretty fortunate that I didn't have to do that because I was working with a company that worked on campaigns and worked on fundraising and whatnot. So I didn't have to quite find and hustle for a job every cycle. I worked for 4 years just working on campaigns and politics in general. But sometimes you had to just pack up and move for another office or to open up a project or to work on something or go consult with a campaign or with a group that you were working with for an extended period of time. So I spent a month and a half in Denver just, randomly while I was living in Boston. And that's just kind of what you had to do, was live out of a suitcase and stay on somebody's couch or they're in their spare room for a month at a time, somebody that you had met, a week beforehand or something like that. And but since moving to DC and then moving up here, I'm pretty fortunate that I don't have to live out of a suitcase anymore. I actually can own furniture, which was a nice change of pace when I moved up to New Jersey. So since then, there's still a fair bit of travel and whatnot, but yeah, you're not forced to just pack up your entire life into a suitcase and hit the road at a week's notice, which is a nice way of balancing work and life, we'll say.
Right. So, do you have a favorite place of all the places you've been so far?
It's tough. I like the balance of New Jersey. Being close to New York City is really appealing, but also having access to a lot of the outdoors stuff. The hiking and the really great trails and just scenic stuff that's out here in New Jersey that people don't really know exists, which I guess is a positive for me on one level. That the trails aren't terribly crowded, but for somebody who grew up, camping and out in the country. It is a nice change of pace from the, living in a city where you're surrounded by human beings and tall buildings 24/7. It's nice to be able to just pop out half an hour drive away and have some really fantastic hiking in the Delaware River Gap or out in western New Jersey, even into Pennsylvania or the Adirondacks. They're not that far away. So it's a really nice balance of things. I miss parts of living in Austin. Barbecue is not quite the same in New Jersey. Go figure. Same thing for Raleigh, North Carolina, and there's really great things about Boston. The history is really unrivaled. Things where you would walk down the road and there's like a 7-Eleven or some just random chain store, and then right next to it is a cemetery that dates to the Revolutionary War. Is like the last gravestone in the cemetery is pre-Revolutionary War, and it's still there. It's been there. It's like the only part of the U.S. that dates back that far because of the timeline of the country, and so it's the only real sense of really long history that you can have in the U.S. And coming from Michigan, where the oldest thing out there is the mid 19th century, stuff that dates from like 1600s is just bonkers to see when you're first coming out of college. You don't expect that. So that was little bits and pieces of each place were really great. But I do enjoy being in New Jersey.
Yeah, I did a trip to Boston last year, and it was really cool, even though I was only there for like a day to do the kind of the tour of the town. And I live in Atlanta, where they famously burned the town down, and then ever since, Atlanta just kind of burns itself down every 30 years and tears down all the old stuff, other than maybe a few Confederate generals statues that still make it for all this time. So your own
wouldn't want to lose those. Wouldn't want to
exactly. It's a heritage, not hate. So what is your kind of personal upbringing? Were you actually raised in a religion?
Not really. So I was raised, I guess, nominally Christian. We weren't really part of any particular denomination. But I think my parents at the time would have considered themselves Christian on at least some level. They were, I think, married in like an Episcopalian church. And again, celebrate Christmas, celebrate Easter, all that stuff. But I can count on one hand the number of times that I've ever been in a church for a religious ceremony or for like church on Sunday. The exception to that was my time in the Scouts. I was in the Boy Scouts growing up. My troop was sponsored through a public school, though, so it wasn't especially religious. We actually had a group of kids join our troop when I was, I don't know, maybe in 9th grade or something like that. We had a group come in from the local Catholic parish, and suddenly they were like, "Oh, are we going to say grace before our meal?" And the rest of us kind of looked at each other like, "Are we going to say what before what now? A chaplain what?" And so that like idea that Scouts was really religious or discriminatory or all of the things that I sort of came to find out later was actually a surprise to me, because my experience was not at all. It was, as I said, based in a public school, so there was very little religious stuff injected in there, and nobody cared, nobody asked, nobody was like, "Hey, you believe in God, right?" It didn't come up, and so we didn't deal with it. And so finding out later about all the discrimination that was going on in Scouts and all the sort of anti-LGBT bias and all the anti-atheist bias, it was news to me at the time, because it just wasn't something that came up where we were. And so that the only time, though, that I ever went to any sort of religious service was in the Scouts. We would go to like a chapel thing, but it wasn't Jesus Christ. It wasn't God. It wasn't any of that. It was look around at creation, at how magnificent, the nature around us is, and isn't that amazing? And it wasn't. It was very, generic. Certainly nothing that smacked of Christian per se. It was all very deistic, which I thought was like, oh, okay, that must be how it is everywhere. And come to find out, no, that's not the case. So you're disabused of your misconceptions very quickly once you get out of that bubble that you grew up in. And that was an interesting experience for me, going to the larger, broader community.
But what made you decide at a certain point that you wanted to be kind of an activist? Because one thing to go, okay, I don't believe, especially for people like you and me who didn't grow up with any kind of overt religion, to decide, oh, this is something that I might want to spend my life as kind of being an activist for.
Yeah. Well, my first job out of college was, as I said, working on the 2008 presidential election. And I did that, and I loved working in politics. I am very passionate about the issues. I care very deeply about the direction of our country. I think that, people who want to burn down the entire system are kind of missing the larger point here, which is, we all are in this together, and the mechanism that we have to help one another and to make our lives better is to use politics. And so I always liked politics, and I decided in very early that I wanted to get involved with that in some way. I was fortunate enough to be able to work on the 2008 election, which was a really, amazing experience, I think, for all of us that were on the winning side in that election. And after that, I was working for a variety of progressive nonprofits and political groups, including the Democratic Party and just the Obama campaign and the DNC and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and groups like that. And, I was, electoral politics was important to me, but the reason that I got involved in a lot of this work was for the issues. Coming of political age in the Bush administration, there were a lot of us that were very passionate about concerns regarding warrantless wiretapping and the limits of executive power, the government having the authority to assassinate people, including American citizens, with drone strikes if they're declared enemy combatants or declared terrorists, I think was really something that a lot of us were really concerned about during the Bush administration. Well, we worked really hard to elect Barack Obama, this guy who was a constitutional law professor, and we were very excited about his the way he campaigned on these issues. And then he came into office and started doing many of the same things. And so I at the time, it was like, oh man, I'm having a really hard time towing the line on this. I'm having a really hard time coming to grips and squaring the circle of the things that got me involved in politics in the first place and the things that I was really passionate about, and going out there and advocating for a political party and a candidate or a politician who was disappointing me in these things that really fired me up. And so I went looking for more issue-based work rather than simply party work. And there just happened to be an ad for the Secular Coalition for America. And I said, what's an issue that ties a lot of this stuff together, right? Because I was working on reproductive issues, I was working on LGBT issues, I was working on environmental issues, and like, what is a common thread here between so many of these issues? And it was very clear to me at the time that secularism was pulling things in the right direction, and that the religious right was a countervailing force to so much of the progress that I wanted to see made in our society. And so I went and got a job at the Secular Coalition for America back in, I think that was 2011, and was there. So 2011, the time is sort of flowing together. But I was there for a couple of years and then came to American Atheists back in 2012, right after the 2012 election. And since then I've been working on trying to tie all these things together. And, I think one of the, I don't want to call it a good thing, but one of the side effects of the rise in Christian nationalism that we've seen with things like Project Blitz, the Congressional Prayer Caucus, and so many of the people that have been pulled into the Trump White House and the Trump administration is they genuinely believe that, this is a Christian nation and that religion should be a driving force behind so much of American policy. And they have created this narrative and created this roadmap to say, we're going to start with this type of policy, we're going to proceed to this type of policy, and then we're going to end up in this last type of policy that privileges religion and is used as a weapon against women and LGBTQ people and so on. And they've really succinctly laid out that path. And that has allowed us to point to it and say, see, this is why this should matter to all of us. This is why this should matter to people who are primarily concerned with LGBT issues, and by people and why people who are primarily concerned with reproductive health care should care about these issues. It doesn't necessarily stand out if you're not deep in it like some of us are, that a In God We Trust in public school bill is directly connected to discrimination against the LGBTQ community. But the other side has explicitly made it that way. They've explicitly tied those things together as part of a broader campaign. And we can point to it and say, they're flat out saying it. So this is why we all need to work together. This is why we all need to partner together. And that's, kind of what led me down that garden path to where I am today of, leading this ragtag band of activists. It sounds like I'm talking about the Rebel Alliance here, but, that's what it is tying together the issues that people care about and taking a step back and seeing what the broader lens is that so many of these issues are being approached through.
Well, we'll continue on the issues in a second because there's so many. It's going to be hard to get.
No shortage.
I have to do them. Rapid fire style in a way. But I'll leave it to you how much you want to talk about the kind of how you became president of American Atheists, but maybe what does the job entail? When you first got it, what did you think it was going to be as opposed to now? Because you've been in the job for, I guess, about a year and a half, I think.
So I became president in, I guess it was September of 2018.
Yeah,
it's been a while now. It's the time is both. It's flying, and at the same time, it feels like yesterday. But at the same time, there's just so much going on that sometimes it really drags as well. So you lose kind of perspective of the time. I've been with the organization for, as I said, it's coming up on 8 years now. I started out working in development, which is fundraising and membership. And after that, I was working in programs. So I developed and managed and oversaw a number of the programs that we put out, including our atheist voter campaign back in 2016. Worked on our conventions and did a lot of our events and all of that. And then I've, as I said, been president since late 2018. Obviously that we had a leadership transition, which gave us the opportunity to bring in some really fantastic folks from other organizations. Debbie Goddard, who formerly worked with the Center for Inquiry she's had something like 15 years of experience at the Center for Inquiry, has come in to take over some of my old position, or the majority of my old position, as well as Allison Gill, who has come in as our vice president for legal and policy work. She came to us from the LGBT movement and is just a really fantastic expert on state level policy. She's really a leader on that front and has allowed us to really build expertise in that area to focus our resources on local activism, building communities for atheists all across the country, but just as importantly, getting people involved wherever they're most excited and interested to make their voices heard and give them the resources and the training that they need to be effective. A lot of this job is about priority, where exactly we're going to focus our resources. I told the board of directors when I was applying for this job that if they wanted somebody who was going to go out there and be, the face of atheism and a spokesperson for atheism, they should probably hire someone else. I view my job as marshaling forces and, helping people figure out what the best priority is for us to focus our efforts and our resources and our time and our money on, and where we can make the most difference. It's one thing, that I think we all sometimes like is debating and getting into debates with religious people about, what the Bible says and the theology behind things. If I'm completely honest, that stuff doesn't interest me as much as going out there and doing the thing, right? Going out there and looking at where people need help, looking at what policies need to be put in place to better protect people from harm, and what policies need to be repealed to protect people from harm. And in a country where children are staying in foster care, and then the foster care system in group homes in just hell, because there are not enough people out there able to adopt, and we're putting in place policies that prevent qualified, loving parents from getting out there and adopting, I'm more than happy to work with religious people to change that and set aside our very serious differences if it means saving people's lives. Looking at people who need reproductive health care and can't get it, or can't get whatever health care they need because their religious hospital in their community doesn't provide it, and also doesn't tell them that they don't provide it, and turns them away and says, sorry, your ectopic pregnancy, there's nothing we can do about it. You just have to go wait out this miscarriage, and people dying because of it. When that's happening, I think we need to go out there and try to change the law. It's one thing to go out and, put up billboards and make ourselves, get our name out there. But I think we've passed that point where that's what's most needed. It was really important for us to do that when, 2-3% of Americans were atheists and 5% were non-religious. Now we're talking about a quarter of Americans or more are non-religious. 35 to 40% of young people are non-religious. Getting the name out there isn't quite as important right now. Literally saving lives is something that I think we really need to be prioritizing. And so putting together coalitions of secular folks, but also religious people who agree with us on those issues is the most important thing we can do with our time, and that's what we're doing.
Well, how do you do like a pitch to someone? Let's say you're talking to someone who's an atheist and they're just like, hey, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, and I'm not really involved. Mm-hmm. To try to get someone motivated to actually donate to nonprofits. There are a bunch of them. Doesn't have to be American Atheists, but hey, that's why you're here tonight. It should be you first. But trying to get someone from being at least activist in a way where they're getting involved somewhat, that it's important to them.
Yeah, the most important thing that people can do is ask themselves what excites them. We like to say around here that whatever you're interested in, whatever issues you care about, because of that fact, it is an atheist issue. If it's an issue that you care about as an atheist, it is by definition an atheist issue. If your personal thing, the thing that excites you is, we'll say, increasing access to affordable or free public transit, let's say. If public transit is your jam, the most important thing you can do as an atheist is show up. You can show up to those meetings. You can show up to, a planning meeting, or you can show up to an atheist event and kind of cross-pollinate, right? So you go to the planning meeting and you say, hi, I'm Nick. I'm here from the local atheist group. This is an issue that I'm really passionate about. I'm happy to help however I can. Or you go to your atheist group and you say, hi, I'm Nick. And the thing that really excites me is public transit. Is there anyone else here who's really excited about public transit, or who would like to learn more about public transit, and cross-pollinate those two things so you can get people who are really passionate about whatever the one issue is and bring them in on the other one. And it's a great way of, number one, showing that atheists are engaged and involved in our communities, which is a way of breaking down stereotypes, right? How many times have you been confronted with that belief, that wrong belief that people have, that atheists sit around talking about how much they believe God doesn't exist, and that's it. The most important thing we can do is be involved in our communities. Churches like to think that they have a monopoly on that, right? They have a monopoly on getting out there and doing activism and doing that sort of community engagement. And it's really up to us as people who understand that this is the one life we have to live, and that it's on us to improve things, because praying about it isn't going to change anything, and hoping and waiting for the next life to change things isn't going to do it. It's on us to improve the lives of the people around us. Madalyn Murray O'Hair, the founder of American Atheists, said 2 hands working can do more than 1 million clasped in prayer, something along those lines. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's on us. It's this whole humanity thing only works because people who are excited about 1 or 2 issues find a time to work on those things. And it doesn't have to be a big investment of your time or your resources or your money or anything. It can literally be, if you have time to write a postcard or make a phone call, that's great. If you have time to fill out an action alert on our website on a particular issue, that's fantastic. People have the ability to invest in making the world a better place at all sorts of different capacities, at all sorts of different levels. Some of us are able to do activism and do this type of work as our full-time jobs, and we're very fortunate to do that. But we have to also keep in mind that there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people who do this type of work for free. They, in fact, pay money. All of our state directors are volunteers. We reimburse them occasionally for travel and things, but the vast majority of them spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars out of their own pockets doing this type of work on issues related to atheism, but on issues related to any number of other things as atheists. And that synthesis, that combination of things is really how we change the perception of our community all across the country, but also how we get stuff done. Every movement of that needle is a step in the right direction. And don't get hung up on that feeling of powerlessness. I think that's something that a lot of us do, is we look at the problem and we say, oh my gosh, there's just so much here. How can I, as one person, fix this? The answer is you're not going to fix the whole thing, but you can certainly make a difference, and you can move that needle, and you can change one person's mind. You can change one person's view. You can, quite frankly, depending on what you're getting involved in, you can sometimes save a life by simply being there for someone or being there for the cause. And so, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Hop in and just do something. Don't worry about all the stuff. Just get out there and do the thing.
Well, there's so many potential issues to talk about, but you mentioned, try, if you're getting started, you go with something personal. Mm-hmm. Well, you were adopted, and you already talked about adoption a little bit.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit before we got started about how, that's one of the things that the government's doing, is enabling discrimination by Christian groups by kind of giving them exclusive reins over adoption. So What is it about that issue, since that is something, since you were adopted, that makes it something that you want to get involved in and see what you can do?
Yeah. It's we have to remember that this isn't just like facts and figures. This isn't just, on average, here's the deal. So much of the work that we do is personal. All of the work that we do is personal. These are people's lives. I think in our community, we sometimes get a little hung up on, pushing away emotional storytelling and an emotional connection. And we say, no, we need to talk rationally about this. And yes, we do. We need to talk about what the evidence shows us. But one of the things the evidence shows us is that personal storytelling really connects and can change people's minds. And so we should believe that evidence, right? And find opportunities to use that personal connection to, again, move the needle, to build networks, to build connections, and to bring people onto our side. Churches have done this for how long? Thousands of years, right? They know that personal connection can make a huge difference. And so what we need to do is look at the tools that they've used, look at the way that they've approached it, do it in a non-exploitative way. I think that's a key difference between the way that we approach storytelling and the way that we approach that personal connection and the way that certain churches and religious groups do, right? We talk about how these things affect us as people, how they affect our loved ones. We don't then do like emotional blackmail where we say, you're going to go to hell and all of your friends and family are going to go to hell if you don't do X, Y, and Z. We instead say, this is how this affects me. And so that's part of how I think about a lot of these issues, is looking at religious exemptions across so many areas, right? Adoption and foster care is, I think, a really easy one because, number one, we're talking about kids. We're talking about people who are, all they want is the very basic that I think so many of us take for granted, which is a loving family. They want to not have to load up all of their belongings into a garbage bag and be moved from a group home into a boarding house, into another group home, into a temporary foster situation. They don't want to be subjected to abuse. Too many kids who are in the system are neglected even within the system, or are abused within the system. Never mind the abuse and the neglect they maybe are escaping. And so we can point to those stories and say, these kids just want a loving home that is permanent, and they want to be able to be kids. They want to have that experience of knowing that they're going to wake up in the same place that they went to bed. And they want to know that their next meal is going to come from the same person. And, that's really important stability for kids. And it's personal for me. These religious exemptions that are out there, we've offloaded so much of the government's function to private charities because we haven't invested in building long-term solutions for so many of our society's problems. We've instead said, well, these churches want to help with adoptions and foster care, so let's just have them do it because we can't be bothered. And this isn't just, this is in places all over the country. This isn't just in, rural places. This isn't just in cities. It's all over the place. It's not just in red states or blue states. It's all across the country. And we've not invested there. And so now we have churches doing it, and they say, yes, we really want to help kids find a forever home. But there's an asterisk there. And the asterisk is we want to find them to be able to find a forever home with someone who we approve of, who meets our expectations of what a good parent is. And as I said, I was raised in a, not terribly religious household. We didn't go to church. And the thing that my adoptive parents were asked was not, what do you believe? Which church are you taking him to? It's, are you going to look out for his best interests? And the answer to that question was yes. And that's all that should have mattered. And what people are trying to do right now, what the Christian right is trying to do, what Christian nationalists are trying to do, what Project Blitz is trying to do, is prevent my family from ever having existed. Not just prevent me from having a family, right? But also prevent my family as it currently exists from ever existing in the first place. Because my parents, my not terribly religious parents, would have been prevented from adopting under this system. And so many people come to us and say, why are you engaging on these issues? Why do you care about discrimination against, this is actually just discrimination against same-sex couples. It has nothing to, nobody's discriminating against atheists. And to that I say, you're, number one, a little myopic if you think that people who are discriminating on the basis of religion, saying we don't think that same-sex couples can be good parents because our religion tells us that they can't, if you think that doesn't extend to atheists, right? These groups who are discriminating against Jews and Catholics because they're not sufficiently evangelical, if you think they're going to adopt to my atheist ass, you've got another thing coming. I mean, this is very straightforward. And so that sort of discrimination is not limited to one target. Yes, it's true that LGBT people are the primary target of so much of this discrimination right now. They're the most visible victims of this type of discrimination. But there's no limiting principle here. That discrimination does extend to atheists, to non-religious people. And in fact, people have come to us and said, I was discriminated against in this adoption and foster care structure because I'm non-religious. Thankfully, I was able to find some other option and I'm okay now. But, that type of discrimination is legal. And it's discrimination that's being done in taxpayers' name. And so it really gets me fired up because it's, as I said, it's not just a hypothetical for me. It's not just if I want to have a family, if I want to adopt with my partner down the line, maybe someday. This is preventing my family with my parents from ever existing because I was adopted at like a few weeks old. And if I can't put myself as, a person who, I don't remember being adopted, obviously. If I can't put myself in the shoes of that kid who is being shuffled from group home to group home to group home after being taken away or leaving their birth parents, if I can't put myself in their shoes and I can't relay my own personal experiences, then we're lost. That empathy for one another as humans that connects us all together as one shared human experience. That's what being an atheist is all about, is recognizing that shared humanity in people and not ascribing it to some higher power. It's recognizing that we are in this together and it's on us. And so when we see someone suffering, we need to do everything we can to alleviate that. Call it humanism, call it whatever. It's humanity. It's part of who we are when we realize that this is all we've got. And if we screw it up, we don't have any do-overs, right? We've got this one shot. So that's why I think it's really important to relay those stories and talk about how this affects us, what our own personal stake is in this. And we all have it. No one is living above the system. We're all part of it. And so it's important for us to talk about how this stuff matters and what it does, what it means to us if the system is broken. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, we've talked for almost 40 minutes here and we haven't even got to the conference yet. So let's transition. Since you mentioned how important telling stories is, last year's American Atheists Conference, one thing you were trying to do was tell the stories of just regular atheists, not just, the speakers, the higher level people within the community. So this year, the conference is happening. When and where and why should people come and join you?
Well, they should come join us because it's a great time, number one. And number two, because it's Phoenix in early April. So it'll just be on that edge of nice weather still before it starts to get too unbearably hot in Phoenix. It's Easter weekend, Phoenix, Arizona. People can learn a little bit more about the schedule, the speakers, what's going on, all the events at convention.atheists.org. We've got a full website up there with all the details that you could ever want. Typically, the way that we approach this conference is, number one, is a really great social experience, a way to get to know your fellow atheists from all across the country. I think it's really important that people know that they're not alone. So many people come to our conference and say, this is the first time that I've ever been in a room that was like all atheists, that was all the people who are like me and who I don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing or, offending someone's religious sensibilities and losing my job, losing my family. I mean, we have people who come to our conference who are not out as atheists, who are really wanting and needing some support and some community to get them over that hump, to being who they are vocally and unapologetically, and being their whole selves, showing all of that to their friends and family. And it's a tough thing sometimes. It's a tough row to hoe. And so we encourage people to come and get some of that energy from the room and from their fellow atheists. There's a really fantastic community in Phoenix. There's a lot of really great humanist and atheist groups down there, secular groups down there that do really fantastic community work, but also really fantastic advocacy and activism. And so one of the most important things that you can do at our conference is connect with those people. Get in there and figure out where you can help, figure out where they can help you, and really just have a fantastic time. We have community and game and social events, so people can just hang out, have a great time, have some drinks if you want, have some snacks, play cards, play games. We have a game night. We have a really great comedy night. This year, actually, we have a comedian, but we're also doing a skepticism and magic show. So Matt Dillahunty will be presenting his skepticism and magic show, which is something that he's done on tour and is a really fun way of learning a little bit more about skepticism, while at the same time having a really enjoyable experience with comedy and magic and all that. And it's just a really fantastic way to unwind and get to know each other. The best things at the conference are not just the speakers, we'll be talking about any number of topics. We have people talk about the activism that they've done, the history that they've researched, and some of them will talk about evolution and science and space. Some of them will talk about the work that they've done to change the laws or build a community, and the work that they've put in to move the needle. But some people will come there simply to network and meet people and do the social side of things. There are people who come to our conference who, I kid you not, never set foot in the main the main hall where speakers are, except for maybe one or two speakers that they really want to see. But other than that, they spend the whole time just sitting there, having drinks with people, chatting, meeting new people all across the country, reconnecting with people that they haven't seen in a long time. We have people who come to our conference every single year from all across the country just to reconnect. To see the people that they haven't seen since the last one. And we try to make it as accessible to everybody as possible. So we have a student rate. So if you're a student, it's $50, which is the cheapest national conference for students. We have a local rate. So if you are local to the area, or if you are someone who, for whatever reason, needs a little bit of extra help to get to the conference, meaning that the full price admission is a little bit too much for you. We have a no excuse needed. You can just pay a reduced price to get to the conference, because we don't want the ticket price to be the thing that gets in the way of you getting there. We want you there. We want you to be a part of our community. And so that rate is $99, which is the same admission. We ask people if they're able to pay the full $250 admission to help us bring speakers in and provide scholarships and provide all of these events. But if you're coming and you want to be a part of this, $99, what that does is it covers your dinner, basically, and it covers the rental of the space. That's it. And so if you want to be there, we want you to be there, and we don't want the price, whenever possible, to get in the way. And we know that that's a stretch for people too. If you have Facebook, sign up for the group or for the event page rather. Find somebody to room with. You can really save a lot of money if you're in the area and you can drive. We have people carpool to get there, because we don't want this to be an exclusionary event. We want as many people there as possible, so you can learn from one another, so you can connect with one another, and so you can have a great time. That's what this is about. We're also very conscious of trying to move it all around the country. So you'll notice that we don't go to the same place twice in a decade. We try to go to all the different corners of the country. So last year we were in Cincinnati. The year before that, we were in Oklahoma. The year before that, South Carolina, Austin, Texas, Memphis, Utah. We want people all over the place to be able to attend this. And that's one of the most important things for us, is to move it around so that everybody can have a chance to get there.
Do you ever get other protesters that show up at the conference?
Occasionally. It's interesting. It's been a few years since we've had a full-blown protester there. But it was a really common thing when I first started working with American Atheists. We would always have people coming into the event to preach at us, to try to convert us or simply pick at us. But it's not such a big deal anymore. I think the idea that there should be anything controversial about being an atheist is something that thankfully is starting to get pushed to the wayside. We still have politicians and civic leaders in the country say things that are really bigoted toward us. But I think the general population is starting to move in the right direction, where people are realizing that, oh yeah, okay, there are atheists out there. It's not a big deal. We're not out there, eating babies or whatever the jokey sort of stereotypes are. We're not doing that. And in fact, we're the same people that we were when you thought we believed in God. And in fact, now you can tell that we're not doing all that stuff for the promise of heaven or the threat of hell. And so maybe you should trust us a little bit better. But instead, people are recognizing that we are your friends and family. We're your teachers, we're your police officers, firefighters, lawyers, whatever, that people in every community all throughout the country are atheists. And they're getting over it. They're moving on. That's not to say that there isn't still a lot of bigotry out there. There is. But I think that using it as a motivating factor for people to go protest us has started to decline a little bit, which, is evidence of progress. We're getting there. We do have people, though, who will come in and, they'll want to chat with us. They'll they'll come in and want to have those discussions, we'll say. And people have a really good time with it. They're not, most of the time they're very polite and friendly. I will say, however, we have had speakers from time to time who have had threats. We had Ayaan Hirsi Ali back in 2015, and we had to work with the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security because she had an active threat against her from Al Qaeda, and so we had to work with people from a terrorism task force to make sure that everybody was safe. But that's the price we have to pay sometimes if we're bringing in folks who have been threatened in that way, and hearing their stories and hearing from them, which I think is sometimes really important. And that's the price that we pay. Fortunately, no one on our speaker roster this year, to my knowledge, has been threatened by Al Qaeda. So I think we probably won't have the same level of security that we did at that conference, which is great because it allows people to get up close and personal, meet the speakers, interact with folks, and again, connect person to person, which is really important.
Well, generally at the beginning of the episode, I do an out of context quote, and I didn't really have a good one for you, but I do have a comment somebody made at your speech from last year's American Atheists Conference. And you're never going to get a chance to talk to this person one-on-one, but I figured if you want to do a rebuttal, feel free. So let me say what this person posted. Atheists care about doing the work of Satan.
It's so funny, the idea that if people think about the whole Satan thing for just a second, right, and that's the answer is they don't. I'm curious what people think the work of Satan is, and if you press people on it, they will tell you that the work of Satan is pulling people away from God. That's it. That it has nothing to do with the work that we do in the world. It has nothing to do with how we treat one another. It's only about you did something to take someone away from God. And what I say to that is, if making people's lives materially better, if making sure that people are able to find, if making sure that children can find a forever home, if making sure that women have access to healthcare, if making sure that children aren't bullied and discriminated against for not believing in the same God as their classmates or their teacher, if that's the work of Satan, I guess guilty as charged. And okay, it's like threatening me with Voldemort or whatever. I don't care. I'm going to do the good as I see the good, and the good that as much good for as many people as possible. And if you view that as taking people away from God, because what I'm doing is showing them that somebody who doesn't believe the same way that they do can do good in the world, then I guess so be it. And if that light, if that, light bulb can go off in their heads of like, oh, wait, this person is doing good work, independent of a threat of hell or a promise of heaven, maybe I could do the same. If that trips something in them, then I feel like I've done a good thing that day.
Although when it comes to, you talked about kind of allies, when it comes to allies to atheists, sometimes Satanists can really help out, because
Absolutely.
most of the Satanists are actually atheists.
Mm-hmm.
But it's some time where there's like, hey, we're going to bring Bibles to school. Then Satanists are like, cool, we'll bring our Bible. And then everybody's like, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
That's when equality all of a sudden becomes a really good idea.
Yeah, it's interesting because, there are times when we're going to partner with people who we disagree with on any number of things. And thankfully, the Satanists are willing to be out there and, take some of the flack for being the controversial ones, right? Like, it used to be that atheists were the ones that, when we demanded equality, people would say, oh, we can't do that. That's, that atheist. Oh my gosh. But now it's much less controversial for an atheist to want equal treatment or to demand equal treatment. And it exposes the religious right for the hypocrites that they are, because they'll talk about religious liberty or religious freedom. They don't actually care about religious freedom or religious liberty, and they sure as hell don't care about religious equality. When someone else stands up and says, oh yes, I too am a member of this community, and I would like to take advantage of these systems that you're putting in place, it exposes them for the hypocrites they are, when they immediately close things off and say, oh, no, you're not welcome. And it forces them to say what they really mean, which is that they want religious privilege, that they want a place of privilege for their religion. They want their religion up on a pedestal. And they think that their religion is entitled to special treatment. It's not that religion shouldn't be, that no one's religion should be infringed upon. It's that their religion shouldn't be infringed upon. And I think that hypocrisy is, interestingly, one of the reasons that we're starting to see so many people step away from religion, is they're just fed up with the hypocrisy, because it's pretty rank right now. It's not even in the background anymore. It's like front and center. This is what religion is in America to so many people, is just disgusting, explicit hypocrisy. And that's, doing a lot of the work for us, which is, I guess, helpful. So maybe I should send them a fruit basket or something. But
well, Jeannie's going to get mad because I usually say, hey, can you tell a joke? But clearly you're not a joke person. So
I'm extremely not.
Unfortunately, you're going to Phoenix for work.
Right.
But let's just say, for the sake of argument, if you did go to Phoenix just to go to Phoenix, and you had like an afternoon just to do whatever you wanted, and you weren't getting ready for a big conference, what would you want to do? Kind of like a question more of like, if you go to a new town, what do you want to check out? Are you like going to find a hiking trail? Or you're going to find nice restaurants, or going to a park, whatever?
Yeah, it kind of depends where I'm going. But if I'm going to like a big city and I have just time to kill or like a free day, certainly one of the things that I'll try to do is find a really kick-ass restaurant. I love trying new things, especially stuff that's regional and authentic. I went to Iceland actually for the World Humanist Congress back in, I guess it was the summer of last year. And one of the first things I did when we got there was I went to a new Nordic restaurant that I think at one point, I don't know if it still does, it had a Michelin star, but I had some really weird and interesting food that really sort of shows you the best of the region, right? And I think that's something that's really exciting about going to new places, is learning about learning the history of it, but also learning the local flavor. I mean that quite literally. One of the things I had was like dung smoked fish of some sort, because in Iceland there's not a lot of trees. So if you're going to smoke things, they literally have to use dung from as like a slow burning thing to smoke stuff. A lot of fish and just the things that are totally different from what we would have here. And that's a really fun thing to do when you go to a place you've never been. But as far as like if I'm here in New York, if I'm here in the area, I suppose the thing that I try to do but never find enough time to do, or as much time as I would want, is doing or going to concerts. When I was in college, the thing that I loved more than anything was music. I played clarinet and saxophone through my entire college experience. I played clarinet for I guess it was like 12 years by the time I was done with college. So I love classical music of all sorts, opera. I'm kind of a nerd in that respect. And being here in New York is a really fantastic it's a great part of being in New York, is there's like all of these symphonies and musicals and concerts and all of that just out there, if you can find time to do it, which is the hard thing. Doing what we do for a living is finding the time, but if it's something that matters to you, you can make time for that sort of thing. And so it's something that I try to do at least a couple of times a year, is going to the symphony or going to the opera, or I went to Birdland a few months ago for just like somebody was playing a gig, and I was up in that area of town, and I said, oh man, I haven't been here in a while, so I'll go here. And I had friends in town, and we all went there because they had never been. So all that sort of stuff is great, and it's a really fantastic opportunity when you're in a city like New York that has access to all that. So
oh yeah, it's probably where to begin on all the options.
Yeah, it's
like, hey, I want to go to a restaurant. Let me name 100 different kinds of cuisine.
Yeah, right. And you're lucky if you can figure out even which type of cuisine you want, because it's New York. And it's like, oh, you know what I've never had is Tibetan food. And there's like 10 really great Tibetan restaurants that you can choose from in New York City because it's New York, right? That's a weird experience coming from small town Michigan, where the entire county I lived in had like 25,000 people. So like it's very different when the people within like 2 blocks is more than were within a 40-mile drive where I grew up.
Right. Well, gosh, we've gone way over the 45 minutes I initially said, but I didn't even get to a lot of the questions I had, which is just the way it goes when you have a wonderful guest like you.
I was filibustering.
Exactly. So let people know where they can find you. American Atheists, of course, the conference. All links will be in the show notes, so that'll all be there. But do the quick pitch there.
Sure. Yeah. Follow us on Twitter. American Atheists is at American Atheist, no S. Or you can find us online, atheists.org, and we're on all the other social media platforms as well. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that. My personal Twitter account is at NotNickFish. And you can follow me there. It's where I do most of my posting and whatnot. I don't really do Facebook other than checking in on what other things are going on. So if you friend me or add me on Facebook, I probably won't even see it. So I would suggest following me on Twitter instead. But you can check out our website, atheists.org. And again, our national convention coming up in Phoenix. It is Easter weekend. So check that out. That is convention.atheists.org.
Sounds great. Well, thanks, Nick, for being on tonight.
It was great to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
No problem.